My name is Ashley, and this is Let's Talk Dispatch.
I do. You're gonna do it. Do it really well.
And I believe the world needs more dispatchers.
Around in the mud, blood, and beer.
Years that I'm not working 4th of July. 4th of July.
Saying community policing, right? What about community dispatching?
So on this show, with the help of my guests, we will educate, empower, and support the heroes behind the headset. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode here at Let's Talk Dispatch with me, Ashley, the Raspy Dispatcher. I'm very excited for this episode. If you listen to our podcast, you should know that I love technology advancing and how it affects the world of dispatching, specifically for me as a dispatcher, but the world of first responders in general, learning about the tech that's out there and the ability that tech has to affect us saving lives, really. And today, we're going to be talking a lot about technology, specifically CentralSquare Technology. Kevin Wattenbarger, my guest today, is the Director of Sales of 911 Call Handling at CentralSquare Technologies. They're going to come on and talk about history and experience in public safety, as well as being the director over at CentralSquare Technologies. They lead a team of 911 sales professionals to sell 911 call taking products in the United States and Canada. We know dispatchers, we love Canada. Kevin has over 25 years of experience in public safety and communication software. He has had many high-level positions with companies such as Motorola, Hexagon, Intrado, Carbine, and even CentralSquare Technologies owns Superion. Kevin is also a former deputy sheriff in Wake County, North Carolina, and served in the U.S. Air Force in combat communications. My guest today, Kevin. Hi, Kevin.
Hello, Ashley.
How you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. Hope you are.
Yeah, we were supposed to record a week ago, but you got slammed with that weather there out on the East Coast.
Yes, we got very bad, severe storms with tornadoes, damaging winds and rains. And when we were supposed to do this, I actually had a power outage. So the nice thing was we were prepared for that and were able to shift the presentation and meeting. But I hate we had to do that, but it would have been hard to do on battery backup.
Oh man, but as dispatchers, as first responders, we know how to pivot. We know how to pivot.
Absolutely. Got to have that backup plan.
Awesome. Well, Kevin, tell us a little about yourself and how you got involved with CentralSquare Technologies.
Yeah, so I've been on the vendor side for now 25 plus years, working with public safety solutions and software and technology to help public safety. Before I made that journey, I was a deputy sheriff, city police officer, and a telecommunicator. So my passion to get into the software and public safety software came from that. I wanted to get into the technology to help save lives, but I didn't want to leave the public sector. So this was a good mashup of the two together for me to be able to do both things that I love. Previous to getting into public safety, I was in the military and I did combat communications, which is eerily similar to what we do in the telecommunicator world and how our technology has worked for the last 20, 25 years. The military has advanced, and now we're starting to see those same advancements on the public sector side on technology and how our local and state governments use that.
Yeah, it's even in the last 5 years, me doing this job, from baby dispatcher to, I'd say, teenager, technology has grown so much. I mean, just in these 5 years alone, let alone 25 years of experience, in this field. What kind of technology is CentralSquare bringing to the table to help our first responders?
Well, that's a good point, Ashley, because if I look back when I was first in public safety and I got my first call as a deputy sheriff, it was a plane crash. And of all things, you never know what that first call is going to be. And we didn't have computers. We didn't have cell phones, right? And so everything has evolved and we're part of that evolution. Now you have computer aided dispatch, which, we're a big part of. We also have mobile computers now that you can have digital dispatch components. Then you have mobile field reporting, jail management systems. And then on the front end of that is the 911 telephony that answers that 911 call, thinking of that plane crash and how that could have evolved today compared to where we were back then. I'm not going to tell my age totally here when that was, but you could kind of figure it out before we had laptops and cell phones. But that's what we do here at CentralSquare. We have technologies that are industry leading, and we serve over 8,000 organizations that impact 3 out of 4 citizens across North America. So for us, this is our passion. This is what we do. We're one of the largest public safety solutions companies that are in the market today.
That's amazing. And I mean, okay, first let's pause and talk about your first dispatched call was a plane crash. Like,
Yeah,
we tell people all the time, you never know what kind of call is going to
that's
drop
right.
in your ear. And I think oftentimes to like plane crash, people falling out the sky, like, when does that happen? It happens. It
It,
does
it,
happen
it
quite
does.
frequently, unfortunately.
And this was while I was still in rookie school as a deputy. So I was going to be a field deputy, and we had our own rookie school, and so whenever they need more personnel, we're sworn deputies from the get go, so we can carry a gun. We have full arrest powers until you get certified from their BLET. You can still do full arrest powers of being part of the sheriff's office. So we were in rookie school, got the call. It happened, and time is a blur because it's been so long ago. But I think we got the call 5 and 6 p.m. It was about 34 degrees and raining. So you can kind of assimilate what really happened in the upper areas of what happened. And it actually came back, I think, to be pilot error, but it was probably a couple miles from the airport and crashed in a wooded area. So they called us to go out and help perform security of the area because we had people that were trying to get on the scene, take pictures. And I was on the USA Today. I mean, it was crazy because all my, fellow coworkers gave me a hard time about that, called me Hollywood and all that kind of growing up. But it really kind of makes you think about what things can happen. And that was a bad event. And a lot of things had to come into control there. We had to set up a command and control bus, had to, get all kinds of response agencies in. And it was my chance to kind of learn that on the fly of seeing what was happening. So pretty neat event. I got a full respect of the National Traffic and Safety Board, NTSB, of what they do and how they respond to a scene and label all the parts, and pretty interesting. But I tell people, and we did what we did then, but our response could have been better by having the technologies that are available today. And when I tell people, it's not the end all be all, but if you can save seconds, those seconds saves lives. I tell people there's a whole continuum on changing the outcome of a serious injury, and it's called the golden hour. So if you can reduce seconds off of that golden hour, you could possibly change the outcome of that severe type of incident and the injuries that occur from it. So that's where my passion comes from every day, everything that I get up and do. And we're out here talking about technology. It's not just because we sell it, it's because I believe in it. And I have a part in bringing that technology to the marketplace and making sure we're evolving here as a company to keep adding those. And it's a tough conversation, as you're going to see today. There's points in it where people, may not want it, or I do want it. And I tell people it's not about who's right and who's wrong. We need to be in the conversation talking about it so we can evolve that technology, create policies, create governance around when you would use it, when you wouldn't use it. So that way, I think about my loved ones. I want us to be using that technology so we can have outcomes that would be safer for them and could save lives, in the end.
Yeah, and I think what's so interesting about, folks who are in the field going into technology companies like CentralSquare Technologies is that you do have that real life memories and experiences with these calls. When you think about like this plane crash call and you think about the technology that's available through CentralSquare Technology now, you're like, man, this tech would have really helped me in this moment. And I know we
Absolutely.
talk, yeah, how technology saves lives, but it also prevents trauma for our first responders, right? Because if we
Absolutely.
can get, yeah, if we can get that save, if we can prevent that loss, you know, we're not adding to our backpacks either. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well said.
yeah. And so one of the big things that when you folks reached out wanting to talk about is in regards to the video starting to become more of a tool for us in our dispatch centers, video relay, being able to see what our caller's seeing, or you know, how does that technology come into play in Central Square?
Yeah, I think it's a good starting point because there's a lot of misconceptions and thoughts about video and what that means. And first, I always like to tell people it's not a requirement, and the video is not two-way. The caller is not going to see the telecommunicator behind the
We're
headset,
not going
so
to be
that's
on FaceTime. We're not going to
no,
be.
it's not going to be like me and you today, right? It's only a one way, and
Mhm.
and to be honest, it's a opt-in type of a request because that video is not coming in as the 911 call. We're
Mhm.
basically sending an outbound request to the caller saying, "Hey," they're still talking to the telecommunicator and saying,
Mhm.
"Hey, look, we have a new tool. I want to see what you're seeing. I'm going to send you a request to your phone. You need to basically accept us to be able to see what you're seeing. I'm going to want to get access to your microphone and your camera, and we have the ability to change front or back once we have that access in case they don't want to rotate their phone, because my mother's bad about that. She'll be FaceTiming me and I never see
You
see
see
her
me?
or whatever. Yeah. And she don't know how to rotate the camera. So our technology allows us to do that. But by
Mhm.
law, we have to ask that, right? Because it's not a granted right like it would be somebody calling 911 and we can get their location. So what
Mhm.
happens with the technology, first of all, is we communicate directly with the device. When they say yes, we get enhanced location now from the device instead of the triangulation that happens with the towers. So we're
Mhm.
getting it from the GPS on the device. Another thing that we get now is in the camera. So now we're seeing what that person's seeing. This is big because, and you probably know this in your training, being trained and or training somebody. It's hard to be able to ask somebody, what's happening there. If it's a car fire, where's the car parked? Is it next to a building? And if we forget to ask one of those questions in our training, or the caller is just so amped up you can't get to that point, you may not know that that could change how we dispatch, right? And so
Yeah.
just by us having the access of the video of seeing what that person's seeing, now
Mhm.
that changes the game of, okay, now maybe I'm dispatching a little bit differently because now that car is parked in a garage and now it's not a car fire anymore. It's a structure fire and it gets a
Mhm.
totally different response. It's not a single engine
Mhm.
response anymore. It's a full complement response. And that wouldn't have been known if that person didn't tell you that until you got to the scene and the first responders got there and said, hey, the house now is engulfed. We need the rest of the complement to come out. And guess
Yeah.
what? We just lost seconds, minutes, a part of that
Mhm.
golden hour to change that outcome.
Yeah, it's funny, we just had a with the rains and stuff out here in the Bay, we had, naturally car accidents and things like that come across more often, and we had a call where it was this kind of weird roadway that we have that if you don't know where you are, you don't know where you are because it's like this tunnel almost, like you're kind of in
Mm-hmm.
between a sound wall and like vegetation. So if you don't know where you are, it's kind of hard to pinpoint your
Absolutely.
location. And we had multiple callers calling about the accident, and they just kept saying, "It's really bad. Like, it's really bad." And you're just like, "Well, what does that mean?"
Yes.
Like it's the ultimate game of telephone you're playing
Yes.
as a dispatcher. And having visuals, I get why some dispatchers are like, I don't know about that. I don't want to see it. That's why I'm in
Yeah.
in here and not
Yeah.
out there. Sure, but having the option to look when your caller isn't really being able to be descriptive, or they're having a hard time explaining what they're seeing, I would find that so helpful.
Absolutely. And I'm the worst caller because of my experience. So I travel the country every week. And a lot of times when I'm driving, I don't know where I'm at, because now we're using our apps, whether it's
Yeah.
Google Maps
Well,
or
that one
Waze or whatever.
yes.
I don't
Mhm.
know where I'm at. And so I ran up on an accident. Same thing. I was on a call. I hung up and said, "Hey, I'm going to call 911." Called 911. And I said, "Yes, I have a very bad traffic accident." They said, "Where are you at?" I said, "I don't have a clue. I can tell you what I'm looking at. I had no
Mhm.
clue. It was on a four lane divided highway.
Mhm.
And I said exactly what you said. You got to get somebody out here now. It is bad." And they were like, "Well,
Yeah.
sir, how do you know it's bad?" And they didn't know all my training and first
Yeah.
responder and being a deputy and sitting
Mhm.
behind the headset. They had no clue, but I had a hard time telling them of why it was bad. And it was a
Yeah.
tractor trailer versus a Honda Accord. So the Honda
Yeah.
Accord pulled out in front of a tractor trailer and it T-boned the Honda Accord. And you can
Mhm.
imagine a full speed of what that is. And I was trying to tell them it's bad. And so
Yeah.
if I would have able to have video, I didn't have to be in the car and showing injuries. I could have been at a
Mhm.
distance and just showed them, look at the impact. And a first responder seeing that, they know
Mhm.
now, hey,
Yeah.
I may going to get air flight en route now, because look at, they had airbags deployed. The crumple zone was so far in the driver's seat. They would know these different things and
Mhm.
change their dispatch. But maybe I send a truck out there now that has the jaws of life in it, instead
Mhm.
of, this was a rural fire department. So they may
Yeah.
not come out with there with the right equipment, and they don't know until the incident commander gets on there, and they're just using, desperate minutes in that golden hour.
Yeah. Totally. And I mean, and it's so interesting, like how each situation can really be impacted by our technology, by our lack of knowledge about what's going on. I mean, we have it all the time where you're talking to a caller and the example I always give is like, there's blood everywhere. And you're like telling your officers, like, there's blood everywhere. It's on the walls, it's on the, floor. Like, this is what they're telling me. And they get there and there's like a speck. Like,
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
no, like it was paint. It wasn't even blood. Like, so this
Exactly. And I
also,
think that that's what we're up against, Ashley, with video. Our
Mhm,
first kind of reservation is the worst. And then when
mhm,
people use it, then they start seeing, well, you know what? It's not as bad as what we were thinking. I used the
mhm,
correlation. Remember how we all thought text to 911 was going to be when we implemented it, and how much it was going to overrun our centers? And now we look
mhm.
at it, how many calls actually come in that way? Very few. And
Very
then
few.
when they do, though, it's usually ones that you need to follow up on. So I
Mhm,
think you'll see this, once it starts getting adopted across the country, people work out how they're going to do it, what technology
mhm,
they're going to use to do it. You're going to see that perception is going to change, because a lot of people's eyes, that perception is reality. But we
mhm,
got to change that perception, because it's not really what you want to think. Same thing for me of that plane crash. I was worried about what I was going to see before I got there. And so my mind was working up. But when I got there, it was totally different. And so that perception has now changed, because the new reality is what I saw.
mhm, mhm. Exactly. And so text 911, one of the things that um, happens with text 911 is, our citizens have free reign to send stuff to text to 911. I've gotten many a mixtape sent to me via text to 911. And you respond back, they're like, that was accidental. I'm like, was it? Like, did you accidentally send
Was
this
it?
to us? But are can citizens send unsolicited videos to 911 maybe through that link they're sent after the call or having access in that type of way?
Very good question. So it has to be a center initiated request. So the 911 center has to put that request out to the citizens. And once that session is done, it's a completed session that they can't send back anything back. They could
Mhm,
call again and then request another session, and they can get back connected. But the citizen cannot request that, get that reestablished. And
mhm,
part of that is so we follow the laws that are in place today and the
mhm,
protections that are there, because it was them calling 911. And that's why
mhm.
we ask permission, but they only grant that permission for when we're on with them at that point. So once we close that session down, then at that point, the session is closed. They can't reinitiate.
Well, that's good. I'm sure that would knowing that probably eases the dispatcher's minds a little bit, knowing that,
Yeah.
this interaction is, up to me, not up to you. So, um,
Exactly. And that's a perfect point too, because you probably will not be using video for every call. It's only if, and your policies dictate this as well, but only if you can change the dispatch outcome or what you would dispatch, right? So obviously, if somebody calls me and said, "Hey, I'm calling to report a gas drive off that happened 2 days ago," video is not going to help me there. So I wouldn't initiate it. But if they called me right now and said, "Hey, look, I see somebody, they're pulling off. I've got a video of their tag," and sure, because it's happening there, and then you might be able to give a suspect description, rate of travel, which direction they're going. So only certain rules will apply, and there'll be some, like somebody calls in and reporting a suicide. That's not going to be one that you're going to want to do a video on. There's just no need in that, because at that point, you're not going to change what you dispatch. So, we'll let the people come in and get on site and do the evidentiary things they need to do, but it won't change the outcome. So a lot of that has to be up front. And that's part of this discussion now, because most people you talk to, Ashley, they don't have SOPs or guidelines on how to do this because it's new. And so all this is being created now. But as I've seen, people are creating these, are able to share it with other agencies. I'm also seeing that unintended uses are coming out of it that they never thought of, right? Not just changing the outcome of what you would dispatch, but how you can save somebody's lives.
And I think one thing that would come up if I was the dispatcher asking the citizen to allow me this access is how is CentralSquare Technology protecting that citizen's data and their privacy once they give us that access? Because I could see a citizen being like, I don't want the police in my phone,
Yeah.
like what, So what is that?
Yeah,
How can
that's
we
it.
explain that?
Yeah, so it really, we have no access to the data that's on the phone other than when the person called 911 and we had their registered 10-digit phone number and we get the alley. And then when we request the location and video, all we get is device location. And that's it. And then we have an open IP socket that we're talking back and forth for the video channel only. So we're not enabled to go get other things off the phone. Data privacy restricts that. So we can only do what we've intended to do in putting out that request. And that's why we do what we do. But whenever you say yes, that establishes that connection to make that happen.
Okay, good. Because I can imagine that being really reassuring
Yeah.
if you have, a caller's like, oh no, having that knowledge as a dispatcher to get them to work with you
Right.
would be extremely helpful.
A
And
good
I
way to
think,
compare that to is like FaceTime. If I
Mhm.
reach out to you and hit FaceTime, I can't connect unless you say yes. But when I do, all I have access is that video and audio that's happening in that dialogue. That's it. I have no other open channel on the phone or device. So it's very similar to that. Ours is a little bit more secure than what FaceTime would be because of we got to compress it and secure it and send it back over into the 911 network. So we got to make sure that the security protocols are followed. But it's very kind of simplistic way to look at it, but it's similar to how you would look at it in FaceTime.
Awesome. And I know we talked a little bit about some examples, but do you have any other examples where this technology may be useful?
Absolutely. So we have one of our customers that's been using actually, and when I talk about this, I'm not talking about what we offer. I'm talking about video as a whole. They're actually using a different product than ours before we developed and got it out there. But what they learned in this was that they were watching people give CPR instructions and they were watching CPR, they were doing it wrong. And so they were able to come back and evaluate and change how they give CPR instructions to have a better outcome. Because when you're giving CPR, that's a life or death moment. And if you're not doing it right, you're not going to save that life. So unintended consequence for them seeing video of somebody doing CPR that they need to modify how they were doing it and how they were instructing CPR. And it might have been even their first responders, right, that were part of this continuum. So that was one example. There was another one that we were privy to that somebody called 911 and said they lived in an area where a lot of water is there, like a lot of waterways, kind of like you're in the bay, and that's kind of an intercoastal environment. And they had fell into the water. They called 911 and said, I need somebody to come rescue me. Well, whenever they sent them the link and found out the person was on the edge, standing on a rock in the water, he just couldn't get out. He needed help because it was a huge barrier to get over the wall to get out. And but if you know how we are telecommunicators and first responders, they send everybody and their brother out. They're going to start doing a grid search to find this person because it plotted him way in the water, which he really wasn't until we got the device's really true location. And then when we saw the video and saw where they were standing, they called off all the resources except for that one engine or the rescue squad that was going. And all they had to do is go down there and give him a rope, pull him up, and they were good. So that's an example.
In the water, I'm thinking you're doggy paddling. I don't even know how you got this phone call off.
Exactly. But we kind of go worst case in our head. And so we're calling out everybody. But this is an example of how you could save those resources to save somebody else's lives. Because you'd imagine how many resources they would have sent out there and they were able to cancel them off so they could go to other things. So I see things like that come up all the time of how they would do things. We had another where it was coming on an interstate road system and something flew up from the roadway and impaled the car. Which you don't want to see the video of that, but what they were able to use with that technology is to get the person's true device location instead of triangulation to know on an interstate freeway which side it's on. Because as you know, it may be a mile or two down the road for an exit for them to get back on and be able to respond. So I've seen many times that the unintended result actually has helped, and they're like, wow, we didn't think of that. And that's what happens when new technology, as it's evolving, that you say, well, you know what, I didn't think of that, but that's something else we can use this for. And the whole thing here is we want to save lives. We want the technology. If it's not doing that, then we need to back off and maybe not use it and have the right SOPs that kind of guide us to that way.
Yeah. And I actually thinking of a call that I had when I was first starting. It was like a house party that ended in a shooting, and my caller was like fleeing. They're in the car, they're all heading out, leaving, and they're trying to give me this info, and they didn't know where they were, and they were kind of on this like border between jurisdictions. And I was like, you got to give me something, and I just thought like having access, like the way you're saying that the technology folks have is allowing that access, we could have pinpointed a little better, because it was like before the rapid SOSs and deploys kind of started coming through, like it was a little pre that technology. So I was like, I remember him saying, you don't know where I am? I'm like, no. I promise you, if I knew, I wouldn't keep asking.
They're like, are you sure? Because I've seen TV shows and they know everywhere, right? It's that perception
like,
again.
TV shows lie, they're liars.
So one of the things that we've seen is you think about an officer chase on foot, and you're relying on their location, what they call out on the radio, which I know how I am when I do that and I run and I'm out of breath and I'm trying to talk and I'm excited. Nobody can understand it, right? So we've had people take that and actually before they start the chase, get them to say yes on their phone. And now where they just basically put their phone in their vest, and now we got real video of where they're going and we get real-time updates. It's a different thought process of how they use it. We've had some strap it to a canine and let the canine go to see. Now, some of that you got to be careful, right, to make sure, because if the canine catches what it's after, you got to be careful. You don't want to show all of that right to the person behind the headset. But the thing about it is getting that officer's location, because a lot of times when on that foot chase, you don't know where they're at until they get to where they're going and say, this is where I'm at. But if they're in a wooded area, they may not even know where they're at either to get back out, because imagine how long the chase goes. For me, it'd be short, but
I'm telling you, when my officers decide to go on a light jog, which is, it is hard. I mean, think about being able to run, put out traffic, turn, find where you are, being able to know if you're going north, south, east, or west,
Yep.
while wheezing. It's hard. So
Absolutely.
I love the idea of being able to see what my officer's seeing during those foot chases, just so I can have a better understanding of where they are, or if they don't know where they are, I can start plotting on the map. Like, if when I see landmarks, I can kind of,
Right.
use my technology that I have inside of my center to find where they are before they know where they are. And second saves lives, especially if our units are going to end up going hands on with the person, which if they catch them,
Yep.
they are. I mean, they're running. It's
That's
going to
right.
be a hands on situation. So you want to get everyone where they need to go as quickly as possible. Experience a revolution in public sector efficiency with CentralSquare Technologies. Their customized software for government agencies and cutting-edge advancements in public safety redefine streamlined operations and data-driven insights. Imagine equipping first responders with state-of-the-art tools for faster, more effective emergency responses. A game changer. As a dispatcher myself, who understands seconds saves lives. CentralSquare serves over 8,000 public sector agencies. The best run communities rely on CentralSquare. So I think one thing that I've always heard dispatchers talk about, especially like folks who have been doing it a while at my original center, when the idea of video technology coming into our centers was starting to kind of go through the rumor mill that this was going to be a thing and whatnot, is the dispatchers seeing the thing that they normally are only hearing.
Right.
So how does viewing these videos in sensitive situation adversely affect our dispatchers and their mental health and their
Right.
self-care?
I think that some of this we're going to have to kind of wait and find out, right? Because we're still on the front edge. But what I can tell you, where people have implemented, it is not the perception that they thought. It wasn't a reality. And we're actually seeing it traverse into now they have closure compared to what they would have had at the beginning. Because most of the time, you know what they called, but you don't know how it ended up. Perfect example you gave at the beginning. Blood was everywhere, and obviously it really wasn't, right? Or that the people got there and was able to respond in a manner, and people were safe. So what we're seeing is it changes that perception, so people have closure. And having that closure, or when you have lack of closure, your brain does a lot of weird things. It starts making and connecting those dots for you, and it really may not need to get connected. I still think there's a lot with this that we've got to dictate with policies and guidelines of when you use that, because I think if we do that, you can control the effects on it. And then maybe you even have guidelines on, maybe at first make it available for who wants to do it. And then what you will see is, we saw agencies do that before. We had people waiting in line to be able to do it later because they had FOMO, right? They didn't want to miss out. And so they all said, you know what? It made their jobs easier being able to see, instead of just having to talk with an irate caller. I can make some judgments based on what I'm seeing. I still think there's things that's going to have to catch up with it on legislation and protection, because what if something happens, that something's on the screen and you're multitasking and doing something else and you miss it, right? So all that still has to be vetted. But at the end of the day, and what I always go back to is, if we can save lives by having it, then we've got to have the protections and guidelines to make sure that if something happens and I'm doing 4 different screens and something happens on the screen, that I can't be held responsible for something I didn't see, because the person's not telling me. So I think that's the aspects of, we don't have all those answers yet, but I think we will. I think about the other side to this is the evidentiary side, right? You ask a lot of communication centers, they don't want it to be recorded to be in the evidence long term. You ask the other side, law enforcement, absolutely they do, because that helps them in doing, detective work on what happened. And they need it to be part of the evidentiary chain, because, like it or not, as telecommunicators, we're part of that chain. And we get subpoenaed and have to go testify, and it's all part of it. But if
Yeah.
we have the right protections, and we should be okay with that, right? But that's the things that's got to catch up. And I think that while we have to be having talks like this, we've got to be having talks with our legislators. We got to have policies. The agency needs to talk with its attorneys and how they want to handle it, because do believe that it's going to be an access issue eventually, that we're not going to be afforded on whether you could have it or not. Because what ended up happening, it'll turn the other way, that people could get sued for not having it. And it could have saved a life. It could have shortened the response time. So I think all that, none of it's right, wrong, or indifferent, because every agency is looking at it differently across the country. But we've got to be looking into it. We've got to be talking about it so we can come to, where we're at today in text and 911s, because we had all these conversations and we implemented, look at where we're at. And everything's evolving as next gen 911 keeps moving in that continuum. We got to kind of, as a group, talk about it, get out there, talk about the concerns, and see if they're really concerned. And then if they are, let's address them, right? If we do see that it adds to, more mental health, then what's available to be able to address that? I love what our industry is doing right now on the mental health side, and the opportunities that is presenting itself, and they're doing a lot of wellness things for our community. And I love that, because I think we need to do that. Some will be affected by it, some others will not. And we got to kind of figure that out. So I think it's evolving, Ashley, of how that is. But on the front side, we're seeing that it's actually helping instead of hurting.
Yeah, I do like the idea of it's creating closure for the dispatcher, because you're right. A lot of times, like, not hearing the end of the call, sure, but when the call you do have access to, you're kind of creating the story in your head. You're creating the visual in your head. And like our blood example, and it's like in my head, like that room is full of blood. I never seen it not full of blood. It's a room full of blood. So
Exactly.
so if I get that visual access to the thing with, everyone's consent involved, then I do have this opportunity my brain clicks what, actually occurred, rather than it drawing a picture. And I'm not a great artist, but our brains, they do amazing things with the stuff we're hearing,
They
and
do. And I think with the policies and guidelines, that helps us to cut down on the mental health. Because if you got the right policies and guidelines of when you use it based on the call that you're on, then that helps reduce what can be seen. And then the technology lets you take control of that. Let's say that they begin to show you something that you don't want to see. You can actually cut the video off without disconnecting the caller. Still recording and doing what it needs to do in the back end. But now we reduce that mental health aspect from that caller, because now, based on their guidelines, our guideline says that that's not something they're supposed to see, and they can turn that video off. But it's still recording and handling it appropriately.
Yeah, and when you think about it, like you said, for the evidence factor, like dispatchers were taught that the questions we're asking them because it's evidence. This is a recorded line. This is before the officers arrive on scene, before the person maybe have changed their mind about what they want to report. And like I know I've had call, and I'm sure every dispatcher has had a call where you're hearing a DV situation or a physical assault, and you hear it and you're like, this is a full out fight, brawl. Like, they're actively fighting. I'm listening to this. And then the officers get on scene and they clear it as like no physical. And you're like, what in the world? Like, come listen to this tape. What happening? Like, I know this was physical. I heard it, So having that, and again, assuming the person on the phone is going to allow you the access to it, but having that visual recording of the scene being a physical altercation, for that example, does provide that extra step of evidence to help victims when they're not ready to help themselves,
That's right. You're right. As that story has changed, right?
It's amazing how often it does.
You're right. It's kind of that telephone game, though. I mean, I have a youth group, and I do a little exercise that we stand them in a circle and whisper in one person's ear. And what happens every time, by the time it gets to the end, it's different. And it's because the way we perceive things is different. and that becomes that person's reality. And they thought they heard this, and it's just because their brain is altered to change that. Well, our callers are no different than that. They're on a telephone, right? They're telling us how they're perceiving it, and it's totally different than sometimes the reality.
Yeah, I mean, and you could tell your youth group, they've already completed half the training of becoming a dispatcher.
That's right. That's right.
Just
You're exactly
doing
right.
that exercise, because it is true. And the reality is that you have to believe your caller, right? Like, no
Mhm.
matter what they're saying, no matter if they um sound like they're lying, no matter if they sound like, they're just trying to get you there faster by the things they're saying. We have to believe them, their truth to be truth. Like, if
Yep.
they say Billy has a gun, Billy has a gun, until someone gets
That's
out
it.
there and proves Billy doesn't have a gun. And so
Yep.
these layers of technology that we're embedding into our systems helps to create more trust, really, between our caller and us. Um, because I see Billy has a gun,
That's right. That's right.
those type of situations can be harder to get to the truth. And if we have a visual in certain situations, I think it definitely help.
Yep. Agreed.
So what other benefits does utilizing video bring into our centers, into our first responders?
I think on top of everything that we've been talking about today is just that it's a good fact check. And we were just talking about that a little bit. You maybe have a hunch that this person is telling that truth, but now you get that visualization now of really what's happening, so you could adjust that emergency response. And I think that that's the key. I gave you a couple examples earlier where we downgraded a response instead of having to upgrade it. But we might have to do that, right? If that car fire that person was reporting, now we see us parked in the garage of a house. Now we're going to upgrade that response and not have to do that minutes after people get on scene. So I think that's the biggest benefits of using video to be able to speed up the response, because based on NINA standards and APCO standards, we're all judged on how quick we can take a call and how quick we can dispatch response. Then the responders are judged by a certain time of how long it takes them to get on the scene. And there's actually insurance standards for fire department, things like that, of how quick they can. And it causes our rates to go up as individuals based on how quick they can get there. But
Mhm.
just something this simple by using technology can affect that. Because yes, we can be fast on taking the call. Yes, we can do this. But if we had a different understanding, we could have sent the right people at the point of need at that time. It could have saved minutes or seconds, or I mean, many minutes in certain aspects. Where I live in rural, it may take them 10 minutes to get here. If they sit the wrong thing, then guess what? It may take another 10 minutes. So that's the
Yeah.
thing that I look at, that it really could change. And I think sometimes we got to get away from the scary part of it and look at this is the outcomes, and this is the true outcome. I don't want to see the injury. I don't want to see the bad stuff. I want to see something that I can make that quick decisions, that I could say, okay, I need to upgrade this response or downgrade it or keep it on par, so I can monitor what's happening and see if we need to send more.
Yeah, and I think that the examples that you've been giving are amazing, and they, especially, I think, when it comes to like medical and, like you said, fire structure things. But really, I really do think about technology, this technology being super helpful for the medical dispatcher, because I do police
Absolutely.
only, and the one thing that I always say on here is like, I don't know if I could do the fire medical side, because you're trying to get someone to do the thing, on their loved one correctly,
Mhm. Exactly.
amidst
And
their,
that's tough.
yeah, amidst their going through it. And
Mhm.
if you can visually see, I know we've all, if you're in this field, you're probably a true crimer and you're listening to calls where like, I was telling them to do CPR and then they weren't doing it. And you're just like, what? What's
Yeah.
happening? So having visuals on these, especially medical scenes, I think I even heard of story where they used the video calling and could see the patient's lips
Yeah,
and the
they can
color of their
tell.
lips help them determine what type of step to take to help the person who was on scene help before the medics arrive. So, I think,
Absolutely.
yeah, I think all of these different calls, and I think, like you said, we're going to learn as we go. And I think a lot of times we can be a little nervous about
Yep.
that reality is that we are implementing something new. 911 is new. It's only what 50 years old. It's a baby,
Yep.
so with our technology advancing, um, we're gonna have to create the policies for the technology that we're introducing into this field.
Yes, we are.
And where do you see technology going in the next 10 years? I mean, you've been doing this for 25 plus years. You've seen it go from like, what is technology to, oh my gosh, we have computers to what we're doing now. Where do you
Wow.
see it going in the next 10 years?
It's crazy to see the evolution of where we've been in 25 years that I've been on the technology side. And this next 10 years, I think is going to be the pivotal part in how fast things are happening. Video is kind of that first part into this, but thinking about if somebody is texting your 911 center, but they don't speak English, right?
Mhm.
You can't really transfer that to a language line. Wouldn't it be great to have translation where it translates from a different language? And not only just Spanish, what if it translated over 100 different languages automatically, and they could take that and translate it back to you in a way that you can communicate, but it records both. That's coming in the very near future. Also, what about the need right now? You'll use language line if somebody's talking to you, not texting, having the ability that it also real times does a translation of the voice, and now you can hear and not need language line, right? So, which we all know that it's a valuable service, but it's just not easy to use sometimes.
It's
So
hit or miss, man. A good
it
translator
is.
goes a
Yep,
long way. If you're
it
listening and you're a
does.
translator
Yep,
and you're a good one, you're appreciated.
that's right. And so the technology is getting there that we'll be able to take advantage of that, and it'll make, I think, our jobs quicker. And again, being able to dispatch quicker by getting to find out what's happening. It's frustrating when you can't communicate to somebody, and that's why we did text to 911 for the hard of hearing. Now we have to do the others with different languages. So that's coming. I'll give a little sneak peek, but that'll be out this year, right, in 2024. Huge things for us, but also transcribing of what's being taught. So think of closed caption for 911. That's actually in the marketplace today. I see this evolving where, not only having these videos in 911, but now we can send them to the first responders, right? And they have it in their mobiles. They have it in their command post to see what's happening in real time and making adjustments as they need, not just have it at 911, put it down to the point of need and the first responders. So things are really moving very, very fast, and a lot of partners are working together. We're working with a lot of our partners to bring that technology, and we may decide that it may not be something we do, but somebody else does, and we partner together to bring that best experience to our customers in public safety.
That's awesome. I think one good point you made in regards to our technology, like we've been talking about technology, specifically in this episode, helping our dispatchers, helping our folks in the field. But you're right when we're talking about using this technology to make 911 inclusive. Text 911 for the, deaf or hard of hearing communities, folks who speak other languages. There is a fear of calling into 911 because not being able to communicate in the language that they're comfortable in. So
Absolutely.
definitely using this
That's the
technology.
first thing I think of that when I go out of the country. I take a cruise, and if I have to call 911, are they going to be able to understand what I'm saying? So I think
Yeah.
about you think about we all kind of live. Some people do in these travel meccas. You probably do there in the Bay Area. You have cruise ships. Think of everybody who works on the cruise ships. A lot of them are not from here. Something happens to them, they need to call 911. Their native language is not English, right? And so when they're in an emergency situation, they fall back to their native language because they're excited, they're scared, they're emotional. And we need to be able to have a way other than, language line has worked, but we need to have other ways to make that faster and cut down that time.
More options, the better. More options, the better.
Absolutely.
So where do folks find CentralSquare? How do they reach out to you folks to see the technology that you guys have? How do they link up with you guys?
So one of the best places is check us out online we are on all the social media platforms, whether it's LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, obviously online on our website. They can reach out to me and I can get them in contact if they need to get more information. APCO and NINA have been big supporters of having the discussion, and we do panel discussions at some of the local chapter level and at the national levels. We do it at our customer engagement conference, which we call Engage. That is all about getting involved with all of these and getting the information that's out there. So plenty of ways of kind of find out more. Every one of my reps today, our account executives have the ability to demo the video stuff on their personal, or excuse me, their office laptop, where they can actually go show you this. And it's not a mocked up version. This is what's out live today that we have in our production. So that's probably one of the best ways, Ashley, is just to kind of reach out and get more on our social footprint. And then there's a way you can contact us and we can reach back to you to get you more information.
Awesome. And I'll include all those links and socials in the description of this video. So don't feel like you got to rush to write it down or anything. It'll all be there for you guys to easily access it. Kevin, this has been a wonderful conversation. I've learned so much. Like I said in the beginning, I love technology and I love what it can do for our first responders who are showing up in person, our dispatchers who are answering the phone, as well as our citizens who are calling in. One of the questions that I ask everybody who comes onto my show is, what advice would you give someone who's considering a career as a dispatcher or as a first responder in general?
That's a great question. And when I got out of law enforcement side of public safety, I wanted to be technically challenged and then still make a difference. And when I started to say, you know what do I want to go do? I tried different things. Be willing to try. And if it doesn't work, don't automatically escape that vertical. Try something else within it, because you will find a niche. And 25 years later, I'm still here on the technology side. I have found my niche and I still can make a difference. But I tell you, dispatch is our first responder. So we thank you guys for what you do each and every day. It makes me feel safe that I know that I am a call away to be able to get the help that I need. It's just a way that you could really connect and still make a difference without having to go put on the badge, without having to put on the headset, but you're still I'm still working with the same people that I worked with when I was in the room. And so that to me scratches all those different itches I have, that I can still be a part of it and then still know I'm making a difference.
Kevin, thank you so much for being willing to jump on our podcast today, talking about all the amazing things that CentralSquare Technology is bringing in the tech world to our dispatch and first responders. And like always, being willing to share your story and kind of be vulnerable in those senses. So I really appreciate you coming out today.
Yes, no problem. And thank you, Ashley, for this forum. This is great. I think this helps us all as an industry and help working with each other. So thank you for what you're doing out there.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, everybody. That was another amazing episode of Let's Talk Dispatch with CentralSquare Technologies. Again, I love technology, and I know dispatchers and first responders in general get a little weird when it comes to tech or anything that is just new. But let's be willing to try the things, see if they work for our centers, because every technology might not fit your center and the communities you serve. But giving them a try, seeing how you work them into your situations and how we can use this technology to ultimately save lives or create an inclusive 911 scenario, we want to do that. Thank you all so much, CentralSquare Technologies. Thank you for coming out onto the show today. Again, we'll include everything in the description of this episode to easily find them and check out their technology. Until next time, everybody, stay raspy. Thank you for listening to Let's Talk Dispatch podcast. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you're interested in becoming a guest on the show, or maybe even submitting your own story, you can do all that and more at theraspydispatcher.com. Until next time, stay raspy.